All my friends, fellow gaming enthusiasts, gurus, game masters, dungeon masters, shoe masters, what have you. This is the Fat Man, and I'm on my last job of the night, and I thought I'm going to give you a little bit of a, experience. One of the things I get to do as part of my job is come down here to the Science Center of Iowa, and you can see it right there. And because they like to close the gate over here, and I have to clean the grease trap, I'll drive up here on the sidewalk, all the nice benches and stuff, drive down the sidewalk. I could get back on the street, but that kind of defeats the purpose, because off to the right here is the door that I need. And it's about 100 feet of hose. Isn't that nice? They moved all the benches. They used to have all the tables right here, and I used to have to get out and move a whole slew of them. I don't have to do that today. Actually, it looks like they just moved them to the other side of the building over there, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I'll back all the way up here, as close to the door as I can get, without hitting anything. All right, because, God forbid, of course, because the pump has to be in neutral, or the truck has to be in neutral in order to run the pump. That means I get to try to position it in such a way and hope it don't roll. All right, I'm gonna hold this thing down for a minute. Going on. Every now and then I keep thinking somebody's going to call the cops. Ignore the fact I got a work order. How you like the grease truck, right? Take my chalk out. For those of you who may not be truck savvy, you always chalk your tires. Just to be safe. I'm going to shut this off for a minute. And then, because this thing is a grease pit, I like that. Pulled off a little bit of branches when it came down. I got to throw this down. And grab a couple of these gnarly old rags back here. Throw them on that board so it'll soak up the oil that's dripping from the rear seal, because the rear seals went out. You can see the spots. And you just get that thing. All right. Should cover most of the splotches. Grab my nasty gloves out of the nasty truck. Over here for a minute. I've been working some really, really bad hours this week, which is one of the reasons I haven't been as active as I'd like. You see that little thing in the window? That merits just a hair of attention. Then I'll get on to what it is I was wanting to babble about. Kind of getting sidetracked. Reflection pool. That pendulum has been part of the Science Center. It was in the old location when I was a child, and then they moved it here to the new one. It was way to the top. And to my understanding, what powers the pendulum is the rotation of the Earth. And every hour, or every so many minutes, it clicks. You can see the little ticker thing on top there, and it'll reset itself. So it's actually a clock of some sort. I suppose you guys a lot of you guys are smarter than me. You'd understand that thing better than I would. But it's always been a wonder of the world. One of those fantastic toys that everybody seems to like to enjoy. So, it's the subject of the toys. I was talking to Rob Gusterson, as typical, and it got me, our conversation inspired me for a moment to think of all the player characters, myself included, that I've dealt with over the decades, and how the majority of us, just like in real world, we are highly materialistic. Like them fellers right there just racing down the street like a bunch of young firebrands that they are, not knowing that there was 2 cops on the other corner over here that I know because I passed them. But as player characters, as the characters progress and they advance, they collect ever more increasing larger pools of stuff. Just like a lot of Western mindset people today do, we have a tendency to want to see how much material goods we can collect in our lifetime, and a lion's share of us don't have the power, the strength, or the wisdom to discard those things we no longer find useful. I remember the total nightmare my parents' house was when my wife and I had to clean it out by ourselves for the first 6 months after she passed away. It took a dumpster, numerous trips to Goodwill, numerous so-called garage sales, and finally a 2-day come get what's left except the doors sale for free to unload everything my family had collected. And 90% of it was just junk. True personal effects, things that meant something to my parents or us, to the family at one time or another, and or not. Because there were, bookcases in front of closets that hadn't been opened in 30 years, 20 years. And stuff stacked to the ceilings in those closets, stuff that nobody even remembers who it belonged to, what it was. It had no real value to anybody that I knew of anyway. And is it how the RPGs are set up, the role-playing games are set up to encourage the collection and accumulation of loot, of material wealth as characters? I mean, I hear a lot of players talk about how they want to play their character as different from themselves as possible, yet that's much harder to do as we say. It's much easier to think, even in a game, we're going to do something that's going to be less demanding, if you will, of ourselves personally. So we're going to sit there and we're going to take stock in the fact that we have how many swords, how many daggers, how many magic rings and magic items, some things that are trumped by newer, fancier stuff, how many suits of armor, and how many chests of hidden treasure do we have stashed away or pocketed in that never-ending deep pocket of holding that everybody seems to be one of the first things everybody wants to get their hands on, is that fancy bag of holding. Is too much too much? Do we feed into that? Is that part of the game? When we're looking at the possibility in Twilight 2000, part and parcel of the game, loss is a minor but key component of Twilight 2000, the best I can see. Loss of associates, loss of home, loss of unit, loss of military structure, loss of support, loss of material goods. It gets to a point where every bullet can be precious, whether as defendable as defense or as currency. The fact that they even have a minor rule for what it takes to police your brass, because brasses can be reloaded. Brass has value. So your unit starts out with so many people, most of them are NPCs. You start out with a plan, the plan goes south. You start out with vehicles, everything's fully equipped, everything is fully loaded, a full tank of gas. And in short order, you start running out of the fuel, you start running out of food, you start running out of bullets, you start running out of options. And you have to stretch. You have to decide to make some of those hard choices. Do we continue representing the United States and the United States military in a good, positive light as we try to figure out how to survive in a post-apocalyptic world when everything's falling apart and shutting down, civilization is disintegrating, it's turning back into the Middle Ages in many aspects. The only thing that winter's coming and food scarce is becoming scarcer. The world's population is diminished greatly. But I have the book, Howling Wilderness, and it talks about things going to get even much worse over the next couple of years. When the droughts really set in and starvation kicks in and even more people die and what few remaining cities begin to eat themselves, basically collapse in on themselves. So, as that aspect, the players going into the game start with pretty much all the loot they need, but they're going to see a lot of it get used up and consumed, damaged, or lost. Your vehicles take a certain amount of damage. You can't just run down to the army depot to get replacement parts. You either have to scavenge them or improvise or abandon the vehicle and move on to something different, potentially down to your feet. The same goes with your gear. You start out with your fatigue, your BDUs, however you want to call them, and time and wear and the weather will take its toll, and before you know it, you're supplementing your military uniform with civilian acquired items, and eventually most of your military semblance of the military will be gone, and in fairly short order. It's just, what do you do? As a game master, do we tend to play the Monty Hall too much? Do we allow our players to get too attached to the things, those I want this particular weapon that can do particular things? I was always a fan personally of having a weapon that has magic ability on it that will allow it to return if I throw it. Even if it's a non-throwable weapon, I want that weapon to come back to my character's hand if for whatever reason I need to improvise and toss it at something. And I would like it to have some kind of other magical offensive item, whether it be electric or fire or ice or something, just to make it even more lethal and give my character even